It's Sunday, September 16th. This is Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Let's roll. And welcome back to episode number 0.25 of Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Thank you for being with us this Sunday morning or whenever you may be listening or watching to this. In any case, first of all, I want to welcome a lot of new listeners that have joined the podcast. Thank you very much. I think a bunch of you guys probably joined following the announcement last week of the Toronto Overwatch League franchise that I am involved with as a founder. And thank you. You're, of course, all welcome aboard. This is not an Overwatch League podcast. Kind of off the top. You're not going to hear about rumors about players or names or that kind of thing on this podcast. If you want to hear that kind of stuff, I would follow at Toronto Owl, OWL. That is the placeholder name for our Toronto team's Twitter feed, or for the business side, you can follow Overactive Media at Overactive Media. That is more the corporate side, let's say. So off the top, you're welcome to listen. This is not an Overwatch League podcast, though. But you know what this is a Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming podcast. And if you are interested in gaming, which I assume you are, because that's why you follow Overwatch, but you're also interested in technology, a little bit off the left curve of the road, let's say, beyond the beaten path, then, this is a good place to listen to it because we cover all sorts of technology type stories. With a Linux bent, with a gaming bent, but not exclusively each side. And we touch on a bunch of different technologies. The podcast is run by myself. My name is Adam Adamu. You can follow me personally on at Grazen, Grazen. That's my personal Twitter feed. The feed for this podcast is, of course, mostly _Linux. Assisting me in the production box is at _macrodude_, which I'm never going to say again because that is kind of a ridiculous Twitter handle. That's my son who does the production work in the background and mixes this and puts it all together. So that's who we are. That's what we do. Thank you for joining us. This week, our non-sponsored video is going to be Call of Duty Black Ops 4 Blackout Battle Royale, which has basically a free beta this weekend across PS4, PC, I believe on the Xbox as well, though don't hold me to the last one. I've been playing it both on PS4 and on PC. My Battle.net account name is Grazen, so Grazen, if you want to look me up. On PS4, it's Grazen, but with two N's. And the reason it's got two N's is because the first Grazen account was lost somehow, but if you know anything about the PlayStation 4, it's got a ridiculous naming system where you cannot change your name, and anyway, it's just ridiculous. So it's Grazen with two N's, if you want to look me up on the PlayStation 4, and on Xbox, I believe it's Grazen as well with one N. So PlayStation, so Battle Royale, the Blackout BR is out. It is getting tremendous reviews. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It is going to be big. It will be interesting to see, how it competes as a $60 US game. $80 Canadian against Fortnite, which is free, and PUBG, which is like $40 or whatever. But this is Call of Duty. This is one of the world's biggest franchises. The previews for it have been amazing. You know, Ninja's been playing it. Dr. Disrespect's been playing it. Like, it's really moved a bunch of the people over there. It's a lot of fun. It's very PUBG-like, if you know PlayerUnknown's Battleground. It's got some, some kind of crazy stuff in there as well, with ray guns and zombies and that kind of thing. So I think it's really a worthy addition to the Battle Royale genre. So we're featuring Typical Gamer up here, COD Black Ops 4 Blackout Battle Royale. So we're just going to play that up there for those of you with a lazy eye, and we'll keep that in the background throughout the podcast. So just a heads up, we are changing the flow of the program. We're gonna start off with small talk up at the top, which we're doing right now, and then we're going to go into the focus on topic next. Usually we kept that at the end of the podcast. Today's focus on topic is venture capital. So you want to be a VC. And then we're going to go into the news feed and then our discovery queue. And that's it. We're going to try. This may go a little longer because of the preamble that I'm doing right now. But we really, really want to keep this to an hour typically. We'll be back in 10 seconds. We're back. A couple of things here off the top. First of all, NVIDIA delays the GeForce RTX 2080 Ti general availability by 1 week. Let me tell you, this broke my heart because I spent a little bit of time yesterday installing Windows back on my main gaming machine, because in order to get the best use of the 2080 Ti and the RTX technology right now at launch, you really need to use Windows. That's the way that it is. I'm not a religious nut for Linux, and so I had to reinstall Windows on a dual boot on my system here to prepare for it. And I figured it was coming next week, so the timing was good, but unfortunately it looks like it has been delayed by 1 week. So according to a release from NVIDIA, RTX 2080 Ti general availability is shifted to September 27th, a 1 week delay. We expect pre-orders to arrive between September 20th and September 27th. There is no change for the GeForce RTX 2080 or presumably the 2070. Okay, I mean, I guess it is what it is. It's disappointing. I've been very much looking forward to getting the 2080 Ti in and running some tests, but that is what it is. So we go from bad news to some good news here. Linux Academy has announced the acquisition of Jupiter Broadcasting, and I heard this on Linux Unplugged's last episode. And I think this is terrific news. I think, first of all, as a guy that does M&A, I don't know the price or the terms or the details or any of that stuff. But in principle, this is a great acquisition. This is a great acquisition for both sides. Jupiter Broadcasting is without a doubt the preeminent broadcaster of Linux-focused broadcasts. They've been around since before podcasts were called podcasts, and they've got, I would imagine, the largest following out there. So Linux Academy, which focuses on education related activities, has really bought into a substantial following and the ability to create and distribute content, which I think is a tremendous idea. The shows apparently are going to continue. Basically, Chris Fisher, who was the co-founder of Jupiter Broadcasting, will continue his broadcasting activities. He's going to become a vice president of community at Linux Academy. and continue running the open source podcasting and web shows according to the news release. These guys are really kind of going into the the open source stuff. They're going to open source their workflow and any of the tools that they've developed for the development and distribution of the podcast, which I think is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. They're also going to support the Linux community, other podcasts, and so forth. So all good for all people, and I think that is a terrific acquisition. Congratulations to both sides. Good to see ongoing activity in the Linux universe. And okay, so that's it. We're gonna pop back here in 10 seconds, and we're gonna begin the show with a focus on venture capital. So you want to be a VC? Stick with us in the next 10 seconds, and I'll tell you all about it. And we're back with our focus topic. So you want to be a VC? Well, you've come to the right spot. My background is in venture capital, going back, well, not quite 30 years, but let's say 1991 was when I got my first job in the venture capital industry. So that goes back quite a while. And so, over that time, of course, I saw the development and growth of the internet, and I was fortunate enough, along with some terrific partners throughout my career and some incredible founders, to have really had that front row seat towards the initial development of the internet. We invested in the first HTML editor. We invested in the first firewall company. We invested in the first ISP in Canada. We invested in the first smartphone maker, which was BlackBerry. We were the first founders, the first investors in that company, which of course blew up. We were the first investors in the first digital cellular company, which was ClearNet at the time, which has become TELUS today. So all through that kind of wave, and then going back really 25 whatever number of years of venture capital, seeing it rise and fall and rise again, and the social media, all of that stuff, it has been quite an amazing ride, leading up to this latest initiative, which is basically esports, that we identified and are funding and following. So what does it take to be a VC? And I'm going to basically just cut it to the basics. First of all, you have to know, some of the basic stuff in finance, right? And so many of you that want to be venture capitalists are probably taking business courses, undergraduate or MBA or what have you. You need to be good at that stuff, just as a basic foundation. And if you're not in that stuff, then you have to understand. So there's a couple of ways for you to basically understand. I'm talking more about young people that have limited work experience from that perspective, because you can make up for lack of knowledge in terms of educational knowledge by, of course, experience over the years. But let's assume that you want to basically start from scratch. First thing to do is you probably should have some knowledge in finance, which would be, either by way of a BCom or an HBA in Canada, or some other undergraduate business degree in whatever location that you're in, which, kind of gives you that training. Now, I have actually become less enamored with undergraduate business programs for a variety of reasons. And I think, in my own opinion, that you're probably better off doing a non-undergraduate business program and learning some other stuff, right? the finance stuff, unless you want to be, a hedge fund trader or something that specifically requires it, is really just tools. And you can basically learn the tools somewhere else. But what it does not provide you with is some kind of hands-on knowledge. And the key to being successful in venture capital is that kind of knowledge. So my advice to young people is do an undergraduate degree and follow your passion. And it could be arts, it could be history, it could be philosophy, it could be computer science, it could be engineering, it could be whatever you are passionate about. Of course, for technology, look, engineering or computer science or that kind of stuff is going to be very good if you want to be involved in those fields. But and if you have the aptitude, of course, then that's a very good start. If you do not have that aptitude, that is not the end of the world for you. Okay, my advice is to follow your passion, but to have a long-term plan. Because if you have a philosophy degree, for example, well, I am a big fan and follow philosophy and read it, and I'm very well knowledgeable about it. I do not have a philosophy degree, but I kind of followed up on it later. Right? But if that is your passion, then you have to kind of be realistic with the fact that there is probably limited opportunities for employment in that field, and you should not look at it as I'm going to be a philosopher. You need to look at it as I am building up a base of knowledge. So again, speaking to the venture capital side, if you want to be a venture capitalist, then you need to start building your tools. And you need some kind of a financial background and knowledge. And the way to do that, I think, is to understand that it's not a race. Okay, you've got a long life to live, and you can basically follow your passions in different directions as you develop as a person. So for undergraduate, I typically recommend that people follow their passion. Even though I myself have an undergraduate business degree, and perhaps that has provided me with some perspective on it. Okay. Secondly, if you do not have an undergraduate business degree, you should, eventually go out and get an MBA or a CFA. I have a CFA myself and an undergraduate business degree, which is probably overkill, but you know what? It's a competitive world out there, and I understand that you need to put some letters behind your name. The CFA is a terrific program. I have been a CFA since 1994. It was valuable to me in terms of really filling out my undergraduate knowledge with some more advanced skills. It is not really targeted at venture capital type stuff, but it really, really, really focuses you into understanding, how the numbers work and what they work and why they are, right? And so you do not need any prerequisites for doing a CFA. Now, if you don't have a business background, an undergraduate business degree, an MBA or whatever, it's going to be tough. It is a tough program. I think 40% maybe past level 1, but it's doable. It's doable. Okay, and if you apply yourself and you work hard, you should be able to get through if you're a smart person. So undergraduate plus CFA or undergraduate plus MBA is what I believe is a preferred route to venture capital in this day and age. Or the third route is undergraduate or not and a founder. If you have that kind of ability to basically go in early and kind of create some businesses, whether they succeed or not, and have a track record of doing that, there are more opportunities for you guys out there in terms of getting funding in university. There are incubators, there are hubs, there are angels, there are so many opportunities out there for you to basically get involved in founding and starting up a company, that there really is no excuse. And I see tons of you guys bringing me deals all of the time. And, some of them are really, really good. And some of them have been funded and are doing well. Others not so good. But you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. Okay, when you're young, you have the freedom to fail, and the knowledge that you gain from failure is very, very important, as is the knowledge that you gain from success. But you really need a combination of both failures and successes to really have a balanced perspective as a venture capitalist. So those are the three routes. If school's not your thing, right, and you're smart and you can hustle, go out, find a group of like-minded people and start up some businesses. If school is your thing, follow your passion as an undergraduate, and then combine that with a CFA and an MBA. And that is the way that I would basically look at it from the beginning. So now let's say that you are, wherever you are, or maybe you're already a venture capitalist and a young venture capitalist, and you're trying to figure out, how do I become successful in this? And look, I am not saying that I'm the world's smartest person, world's most successful venture capitalist. I think I've had a good string of investments and a good string of being ahead of the curve over the last 25, 26, 27 years. And I think the secret behind that is you need to live the tech. And by that, I mean you need to live the technology that you want to be an investor in. You can't, leave it as a side job and think that venture capital opportunities are basically modeling, discounted cash flows. Venture capital is living and breathing the industries that you are interested in. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to be a good venture capitalist. You may be an average one, or you may be a lucky one, but you're not going to be good in terms of your skills. And by this I mean, you need to be passionate about what you are doing, and you need to live it. So let me give you a couple of examples. The first one, I'll go back to the 1990s, okay, when I invested in research in motion. So during that era, I had graduated from university at the wonderful University of Toronto's Bachelor of Commerce program, which I think is a terrific program, in that it teaches you theory rather than practice. And every kid now wants to learn, the practice rather than the theory. And my view is you're going to get a lot of time in your career to learn the practice, okay? Having a good grounding in the theory is incredibly important. CFA does that for you too. In any case, I was a nerd, in the Gen X kind of fashion, right? So I was a nerd in the sense that, look, I went out on weekends, I had a girlfriend, I did, all the kind of stuff that the cool kids did, but at the same time, I had an Apple Newton. I had a CompuServe account. I would go onto bulletin boards and take a look and see what was happening. I had, an Atari 130XE somewhere in the background that I disassembled to take a look and see how it ran. And I started to code programs. In high school, I developed a little game that I remember taking to my brother after a lot of work and showing it to him and saying, here's this game I developed. And I think it was like a little kind of Radio Shack or Tandy computer at the time. And he kind of looked at it and said, yeah, it sucks. Right? But I did that because I was passionate about computers and technology. And I wanted to be involved in understanding how this stuff worked. And so I lived it. And so when I got a job as a venture capital guy, as an associate in 1991, I knew this stuff. Like, I knew the community. I knew what was happening. I knew it was hot. And when I saw a business plan for this company that had this SGML, structured generalized markup language, and they were talking about these new developments in this hypertext markup language, and this internet thing, was going to basically be really big, and that evolved into the world's first HTML editor. I knew that thing was going to be big, okay? And that wherever and however the technology would develop, this was a good opportunity. And that was probably my first big win in terms of as a venture capitalist. But then when I saw the firewall stuff, I knew that in order to basically get this internet stuff distributed widely, you needed to have security in the business, in the business side of it. And these guys were one of the top rated firewall companies. It was called Border Networks, and it was acquired by Secure Computing, which was acquired in turn by McAfee, which was acquired in turn by Intel. And we did pretty well on that one, actually. But you needed to live the stuff so that when you see these guys talking about firewalls, you know that that is something that has to evolve if your long-term view on the internet is going to happen. When Jim Balsley came to see me about his opportunity for a smartphone, I had an Apple Newton on my desk. I was already into it. Like, I had to kind of be in the zone to understand why the idea that I could have something strapped to my hip that could send me an email wherever I was wirelessly was incredibly powerful. And in order to understand why that would be powerful, I needed to understand what a PDA was and what email was. And believe it or not, most people didn't have an email address back then. I had an email address that started with something, something, something at CompuServe. Okay. And so that was my email address. So I knew what email was because I lived the technology. And you need to live the technology to be able to understand where the opportunities are. You have to live the technology. And so, more recently, that's essentially what I've done throughout my career. More recently, I switched from Windows to Linux about 1.5 years ago. And the reason I switched from Windows to Linux, aside from all of the good reasons as to why Linux is better than Windows, was that is where the opportunities are going. The Linux ecosystem, with the acquisitions of some of these, Linux platforms, and the installation, the fact that all of the web servers are running them, all of the best technologies today are wrapped around Linux, from artificial intelligence to quantum computing, to things like Kubernetes, to even package managers, okay? All of the cool technologies are tied to Linux. And if you want to be ahead of the curve, including blockchain, by the way, right? If you want to be ahead of the curve, when the opportunities hit, you got to live it. And you got to live it by running it. And so I switched all of my Windows machines into Linux, in large part because I needed to live Linux to be able to understand the technologies. On the esports side, esports and video games has been a passion of mine forever. And that one, I've lived for 25 years. Okay, and so seeing the combination of the opportunities that have happened was important for me to be able to see that opportunity was there. Okay, and then with respect to something like this podcast, a big part of the reason for creating the podcast was to live the streaming life. To do this, which is, a crappy old podcast, I admit, but it gives me a perspective on what's involved. How do you put it together? What kind of a computer? What kind of a mic? If you remember the early episodes, I couldn't figure out how to use the mics. Okay, now I know how to use the mics. How do you mix it? What are the technologies for putting it all together? How do you distribute it? How do you get users? How much does it cost? Right? What are the different ways for increasing your viewer user base? Right? And I am by no means never going to be a podcast content creation expert. I have met so many people that know so much more about this than I do that it makes me feel completely uninformed. But I know the stuff now because I'm living it. Okay? And creating and distributing content will be a big thing. It already is, but it's getting bigger. And podcasts are big. And they're getting bigger. And Twitch is big. And YouTube is big, of course. And so through this mostly Linux side, we have basically gone through all of those areas. And, you know, like I said, my shows aren't good in terms of the production value. Apologies to William. But you know what? I probably haven't given you the resources to basically really put this together perfectly. And we're doing this kind of part-time anyway, right? But I'll tell you something. Macro Dude has learned a lot as well. But anyway, the point being, of course, is you have to live it. You have to live whatever the technology that you want to invest in is. And that could be pharmacare, that could be technology, that could be wireless, that could be whatever. You need to live it. And it's not work if you love it, okay? It's not work. Like, I don't use Linux and think to myself, oh, this is, you know, I've got to work now and learn about Linux. No, I like using Linux. And every time I use Linux, I learn more about the community. And when I do this show and I follow the news feeds, I learn more about everything that is going on in there. And when I watch acquiring companies by other companies, like the Jupiter broadcast deal, that also kind of heightens me to the trends. So you need to live it. And I think that is, I guess, the best advice that I could give you, okay? From the time that you basically, you know, are graduating high school and thinking about what to do next, to the time that you basically have a job in venture capital and are trying to figure out how to be good at it, that is my advice. Live it. Learn the fundamentals. And I guess finally, I would just say networking is, of course, very important. You got to get the deal flow. The deal flow is something, though, that as a young person is going to come to you. But your objective is to, of course, network enough so that the best deals come to you first. But we'll leave that for some kind of advanced lesson down the road. And that's our focus on topic. Holy crap, we've gone over our 1 hour limit almost already. So I'm going to figure out how we're going to keep this short. So join me in 10 seconds and let's figure out what we're going to do with the rest of this episode. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us here on Mostly Linux at Mostly Gaming. Okay, so we're about 34 minutes into the broadcast right now. I am going to, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through some of the news feeds and the discovery queue, and we're going to get it all done in an hour. I'm pretty sure I can do it. Let's see how well we can get this done. Okay, so our first story here is from NVIDIA. This goes back to the 2080 Ti cards, the RTX cards. And NVIDIA published a blog that basically describes the architecture in depth. We've got the link in the show notes. The article is NVIDIA Turing Architecture in Depth. Now here's kind of an interesting thing, just kind of backing off of that venture capital thing. You know, I've been following this stuff and I'm watching what NVIDIA is doing. And my view right now is that this ray tracing stuff is going to be big, big, big. Okay, this is the way that this technology for graphics is going to go. It's not going to go, you know, today or next week or next year necessarily, but we are going to move in this direction. And what NVIDIA has done here in terms of combining the architecture between, you know, the RTX technology, the artificial intelligence technology in there, and so forth, is going to. That's a risky move, but I like risky moves. It will also have an impact on how technology develops in the software side. You know, right now Microsoft has announced the DirectML and DirectX ray tracing, so the DML and the DXR APIs in early 2018. Which can use, which NVIDIA is using to deliver the ray tracing processes on the hardware, and of course, Vulkan, the Khronos project, Vulkan has not incorporated ray tracing technology into its API, and that is certainly something that will be coming. And it's also going to be interesting to see what AMD does. But this is going to be big, in my opinion. Going back to the story about living it, I would, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I would go and take a look at this article, NVIDIA Turing Architecture in Depth. Again, go and take a look at our show notes there. Next story is from Vulkan. This story is from the Khronos group. Vulkan has just become the world's first graphic API with a formal memory model. So what is a formal memory model, and why should I care? Those questions are actually asked right in the Khronos blog, and we're just going into the blog from a couple of days ago. This is khronos.org. Formal memory models are relatively recent developments in computer science, coinciding with the rise in availability of multi-core processors. There's still a lot of active research being done on how to make these models scale to massively parallel systems with new notions like scope synchronization. As GPUs have become more parallel and programmable, and other associated shading languages and compilers have become more sophisticated, the need for a formal memory model for GPU graphics and computer programming has become increasingly acute. And so the Vulkan memory model is based on the C++ memory model, but adds valuable functionality, including scopes, storage classes, and memory availability and visibility operations. Scopes allow synchronization to be limited to threads in close proximity to each other. So let me just kind of go back and speak in English here for those of you that are casual listeners. What this formal memory model basically does is it allows for It basically manages the memory on your system in a way that is beneficial for a multi-core, multi-processor system. And what we're seeing is that we're moving to a multi-core environment on the CPU side with massively parallel operations. And the memory model allows these massively parallel systems to each access parts of the memory together at the same time without overriding each other. That's basically, in the simplest of terms, and probably at least 50% correct. So that's what it does. This is big as well. And between what's happening here on the multi-core side, what's happening on the GPU side, what's happening with ray tracing, we're actually in a very exciting time for computer graphics and technology. Next story here is Microsoft warned Windows 10 users not to install Chrome or Firefox. This was basically one of the ridiculous articles of the week. Basically, on one of the betas of Windows 10, somebody discovered that when you basically pop up to install Chrome or Firefox, Microsoft basically inserted a warning that said, "You've already got Microsoft Edge, the safer, faster browser for Windows 10. Open Microsoft Edge," in kind of a big blue box, and install anyway in gray on the other side. Look, Microsoft has been desperate to try to get people to use Edge forever, right? When you basically first run, I just installed Windows, as I was saying earlier on. So when you first run Windows, it gives you it installs Edge, and that's it. And when you first run Edge, it tells you why that's better. When you try to install something else, it actually tells you that, with this warning here, that, hey, don't do that. And then even after you install that, they've set it up so that it doesn't open by default. You have to go into settings and then set the new browser, let's say Firefox by default. And then when you do that, it actually gives you a warning there as well. They give you warnings everywhere. They want you to use Edge because they want to basically milk your data. And so this kind of got a lot of traction out there in the news. This was not a surprise to me. Not even necessarily a big deal to me, but Microsoft has apparently, latest news is they have backed down from that, and they will no longer push that down into the final release. That was a beta that it was basically running in. A couple of other stories here on just some quick updates to Wine. Wine 3.16 is out, which fixes issues in multiple games like Overwatch and Warframe. Overwatch has been running pretty well for some time, particularly under DXVK. 3.16 fixes some niggling issues that basically continued. I imagine that the wine staging and the e-sync and the no pulse versions are also going to be coming out. Your best bet is to continue to use Lutris, in my opinion, if you're installing stuff like that. They are doing a tremendous job in terms of updating and maintaining it. But in conjunction with Wine 3.16, DXVK 0.72 is out, bringing more configuration options and game fixes to the I guess the Vulkan DX to Vulkan translator. This is not yet in Proton, so if you're running your Linux, your Windows games via Proton, DXVK 0.72 is not available yet, but it should be coming out in the next little while. One of the fixes that is meaningful to me is it basically fixes some problems with NVIDIA graphics cards on Dragon Quest 11. I've been running that in Linux. Yeah, it runs well, but there is a problem in there that apparently DXVK 0.72 is fixing. And that is our news feed. Remember, the notes for all of these and the links are all included in the show notes, so go back there and take a look when you have a chance. And we'll be back in 10 seconds with our Discovery Queue. And we're back with the Discovery Queue, bringing you all of the new games and releases that you can play on Linux this week. The big release this week has got to be Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And Shadow of the Tomb Raider is, of course, it's a Windows-only game right now. Now, the other two Tomb Raider games, the two prequels to this, have both had native Linux versions that were ported by Firo and then sold as native Linux. This is kind of interesting because Shadow of the Tomb Raider already works on Proton, and from what I understand, I have not bought it and I've installed it, but from what I understand from reading from others, it works well in Linux. You just basically hit install, it installs, and it runs, and you're good to go. So that's interesting, because Firo has a business of porting and then selling these things directly, and DXVK Proton already does the job. I'm not going to buy this right now. I'll put it on my wish list. I haven't finished the last Tomb Raider, so I was tempted to basically download it and install it to see how it works for testing purposes, but quite seriously, there are so many freaking games out there today. I can't justify another $80 for this. But the next story is the Culling that kind of popped up. The Culling has gone free to play, and the Culling is a battle royale game that has a native Linux version. Now, speaking of that, just as an aside, the Call of Duty Blackout battle royale mode, I have installed it on Linux through DXVK 0.71, and I don't remember whether I actually ran it to play it. I'll come back and let you guys know next week. I believe it is playable. I believe that Call of Duty Black Ops 4 Blackout is playable on Linux through DXVK. But in any case, the Culling has some decidedly mixed reviews. It's a battle royale. It's basically your battle royale on a remote island. Paradise. 16 contestants have 25 minutes to explore, scavenge items, craft weapons, build traps, hunt, and kill each other. Only one will be crowned the winner Do you have the guts to survive? And like I said, the reviews are mixed. 62% of the user reviews are positive. 58% are positive. That's for all time. Not really sure what the negativity is coming from. Let's take a look. Okay, so apparently it's more from, you know, the development side. Apparently it crashes, it's a mess, programming and whatever, and hopefully they will get this stuff worked out. This did come out as a pre-release. I think it is a final now. It doesn't look like it's a pre-release anymore. I haven't played it, but I have just installed it, so we'll take a closer look at that. That is The Culling by Xavient and Xavient Games. It is free to play and it is native Linux. So give that a shot, and you know, maybe let's chat about it a little bit further next week after I've had a chance to give it a run. Next game on our list is Victory at Sea Pacific. Victory at Sea Pacific. Let's take a look. Victory at Sea Pacific. This is a $41 game. So legit. These guys think they got something here that you're willing to pay 41 bucks for. All right, let's run the trailer. This is Victory at Sea Pacific.
We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be.
All right, I like that Winston Churchill voiceover in the back. So this is okay. So this is a legitimate game. Victory at Sea Pacific is the exciting game of naval RTS combat set during World War II, bringing an epic approach to real-time strategy wargaming. Search and destroy enemy fleets across an open-world sandbox in a desperate attempt to change the course of history. The reviews are mixed. It's Evil Twin Artworks. Evil Twin Artworks is the publisher as well. It is interesting. I'm gonna put it on my wish list. I am not gonna pay 40 bucks for it though. Sorry guys at Evil Twin. I'm probably gonna put an hour into this game at max if I ever do buy it. So you know, I gotta price it on an hourly basis, and 40 bucks an hour is too much for me. But it does look interesting and probably worth a wish list. Next game on the list is called Just One Line. Just One Line. Just One Line. It's came out September 12th, so it's a few days old. It's now available at a 15% discount, so it's available for about 10 bucks. And Just One Line is a fantasy RPG gamebook look indie game heavily focused on choices and their consequences, in which you may compete with other players in an interactive leaderboard. Create different adventures and embark on epic quests, unlocking new content for your next playthrough. Alright, so it's a little bit of a quirky kind of RPG type thing with some kind of a multiplayer component to it. Let's take a look at the trailer. All right. Okay, we get it. We get it. We get it. You're basically creating, you know, a kind of pixely kind of graphics, probably Unity engine game that provides a lot of kind of customizability, and you're selling it for $10. So that's JOL Studios. I'm gonna add that to my wish list. Again, it's probably worth a look-see later on, just to kind of see, you know, how this thing is developing. This is the kind of game that if you're kind of on the right, at the right place at the right time, can become big. The reviews have been mostly positive. That is just one line. That was released on September 12th, and there's a 15% discount until September 19th. What else do we have here? What else do we have? Let's do one more. Access Football 2018. I'm not going to get into that one. I put that one in there just because it was interesting. From, you know, Madden came out. This is more of a sim than Madden. I'm a bit surprising that that there is, you know, kind of like an indie football title out these days. That is, there's a native Linux version as well, which is kind of cool. Let's take a look at the last game that I actually want to take a look at. It's something called Escape the Labyrinth. Escape the Labyrinth. This is basically $10 as well. Linux native, released September 15th. So this is a brand new game by Project Cloud Game Studios. You are cold and alone, shrouded by darkness. Using your wits and hidden items, you must fight for your survival and escape a seemingly endless something. There's no user review. This just came out today, September 15th. I know nothing about it, but it looks like, let's give them a little promotion here. Let's take a look at the trailer. So I don't know. I mean, okay. So this basically, what you're in a dungeon and you got to get out. So it's basically like a puzzle thing, first person. You know, you got to walk through the dungeon and try to figure your way out. If you like those kinds of puzzle games, it is probably something that you can maybe get together with a girlfriend and turn out the lights and try to figure out if you can escape the dungeon together. And it's, you know, it looks like it could be a little terrifying if you're in the dark and you're playing this game. I don't know if there's anything chasing you or anything, but it's not going to make my wish list, though. Not for me, but, you know, an interesting project by Project Cloud Game Studios. Good luck to them. And that's our Discovery Queue this week. I'm going to be back in 10 seconds to wrap up this show. And we're back. It's the back of the show. Thanks for sticking with it. You know, if you guys have made it to the end, you guys are the core fans. And I thank you very much for listening to this disaster of a show. We are available if you're basically following us through and don't know how to reach us. We are available on Twitter at Mostly Linux, mostly_Linux. We are on Twitch. We are on YouTube. We are on PeerTube. We are on Discord. We are on Telegram. We are on everything. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, audio podcast, go to mostlylinux.libsyn.com, libsyn.com. Links there for you to be able to subscribe through Apple Podcasts and whatever. If you're using some kind of like Android podcast, if you're using Stitcher, if you're using Google Play, if you're using Spotify, if you're using Dogcatcher, if you're using Podcatcher or SoundCloud or any of those other ones, just go and search for mostly_Linux or just Mostly Linux, or maybe just Mostly, and we'll probably come up in the list there. And then subscribe, and you'll get these disaster episodes delivered right into your podcaster every single week. And that's our show. And you know what? My recorder here says 59 minutes and 30 seconds, which means with some editing, it's probably going to come in well under an hour. So we did it. And thank you again for listening. Listen, buy somebody that you love something small this week. Not because there's any reason, but, just because. And here's the secret. It'll make you feel better than it makes them feel.